Okie dokes. We are streaming, we are live, and we're going to talk about IEP meetings. Let me just make sure everything looks good. Looks good. All right. I went live in the summer, over summer break, and that was a doozy. I freaked out because there was something wrong with my audio. I had Mark log in at the beginning of it, and he was like, I can't hear you, or you're echoey, I don't remember. And so we couldn't figure out the problem. And I use OBS as a streaming software since I'm going to share my screen. And so I'm not streaming directly on YouTube, but it goes to YouTube. And it was rough because I sent out a link for it, but then the wrong link ended up working because I had to restart it. I don't know. It was a whole thing. But we are live, and it looks like we're in here. And I know there's at least a 5 to 10 second lag. So when you get in here, I just appreciate if you throw me a hi in the chat so I know you can hear me all as well. And I'll probably say that periodically as we get started here too, just as we get people in here. If we don't, we don't. And this is recorded for you to come back and watch and reference. But today we are going to talk all about IEP meetings. Recently I had a question on one of my videos, one of my blogs actually, where in that blog I was talking about the process of writing an IEP that I was writing at that time. So it was really cool because I felt like I could maybe add some value or find some connection with my fellow school-based SLPs and just talk about my process. And through that came some questions about my process. So I thought, well, there's two things I can offer here. A video or a live like this where we just talk about it. Let's chat about my process. I did make a PowerPoint so you could kind of see in bullet points that, just basically how my brain works, because it's sometimes a little disorganized for me. It makes sense when I'm doing it, but getting it out on paper for you to be able to explain it to you makes more sense to me. Also, the other piece to that is I do have a school-based SLP course where we dive deep into all things school-based SLP, planning therapy, data collection, getting ready to start sessions. If you're at the beginning of a school year, you're beginning at the beginning of your time in the schools. You might have just gotten hired on, you're starting in January, you're starting now, whatever. I do have that course. We're going to talk about that course at the very end. I want to get to the meat of what we're talking about today. But again, just feel free to use this chat. It's yours. Ask me all the questions. That's why I did a live, so that way while I'm going through these things, any questions that come up for you, I can answer right away, and then it's recorded and we can always go back to them. So let's get started. If you want to just what, say hi if you're a fellow SLP. Are you in the schools? Yes or no? Where are you? What state are you in? I would love to know what is kind of bringing us all together today, or where we're all coming from. A little bit about me before I show you my PowerPoint, just really quick. I am Marie Murataya. I am a speech language pathologist in Southern California. I work in a public school district for their preschool program. I work in an inclusive preschool program. It's a half-day inclusion program for preschoolers. So the way my scheduling looks is I have an AM session and then a PM session every day. So my caseload is made up of 3 different preschool classes. I do a lot of push-in therapy, and I do a hybrid. I do some pull-out therapy, but the bulk of what I do this year, it's actually very new to me, but I love it, is I am co-teaching with the teachers, and we do a lot of fun things together. I lead circle times, I run centers, I do individualized push-in therapy, pull-out therapy, but I'm also part of an IEP team for every single student on my caseload. And I'm going to be honest, I love being on an IEP team. When I first started, I didn't know how I was going to feel about it because it does sometimes feel like a big deal, and it is a big deal. All of the IEPs we do are a big deal. And because they're for who? Our students, our little ones, or if you work with middle school or high school, maybe they're not so little, but there are students, and they are humans that deserve our time in those meetings and sometimes beyond. Their families deserve our presence and our time. So we're going to talk about my process today, but I also do want to make sure we touch on that, and I'm very mindful about why we're here. Why are you in this live? Maybe because you want more insight on an IEP meeting process or writing the IEP, but also we're doing this for our students. They're at the helm of it. So that's my little spiel. Again, hello, shrugs and kisses. I see screen names. I don't see names. You don't have to put your name, but if I don't know your name, that's why, because I just see screen names in the chat. So feel free to put your name, but you don't have to. But hello, thank you for being here. Okay, we're going to get started because your time is very valuable to me, and I want to get into it so you have the opportunity to ask questions. Ask them throughout, okay? I'm not kidding you. I'm looking at the chat while I'm doing this. So what I'm going to do is, I figured out how to do this earlier. You're going to see me move a little bit. I'm going to get smaller. Oops, I'm on the wrong thing. Hold on. This is the beauty of live streaming, because I'm not clicking the appropriate boxes. There we go. Now she's getting smaller. Okay. All right. And then I want to make sure this is in the right spot. Perfect. Okie dokes. IEP meeting hacks. We're going to walk you through my process. Let's go. Let's go. All right. First things first. What type of meeting are we talking about when we're thinking about an IEP? You have an IEP coming up. Maybe it's next week. Maybe it's in 3 weeks. Maybe it's in a month. But what type of meeting is it? You want to think about what's your role, and you want to have a game plan depending on those two first things. So the two main types of meetings. Now, of course, there are a variety of IEP meetings, right? We could have one where we're just talking about progress. Maybe a parent requested the IEP meeting. We might have an IEP meeting that is specifically for, sometimes they're called behavior intervention plans. We might have one that's for a TSNA, by the way, if I use any acronyms that you don't understand, tell me, put them in the chat because, or if you're watching this video later, pop it in the comments so I can make sure I respond and let you know what I was talking about. I'll forget, which is funny because one of the things I'm going to talk about later is, when we're talking with parents and families and team members, making sure we're thinking about our language. And sometimes when we say words like phonology or different things, not everybody understands, like a SLP understands what they're talking about. And so we want to make sure we're using terms and we're saying things or we're giving definitions. So TSNA, by the way, is in my district, and probably this is kind of within my SELPA, but as essentially a meeting or an assessment for a one-on-one aid. I can't right now think of all of the letters for that acronym, and that's not why we're here, so we're not going to get into that. But the two main types of meetings that we will attend throughout a school year are a triennial or an evaluation review, and an annual, a plan review. Now, my district this year recently started making sure, telling us we're using the terms evaluation review and plan review instead of tri and annual, but they're interchangeable. They're the same thing. So the tri is where you're doing that every 3 years, you're doing that full battery of assessment to determine eligibility for special education and related services. An annual is that yearly meeting that you have to update goals, or you go over progress, update goals and services, and make sure everything is appropriate for the student on a yearly basis. For both of these meetings, when I know I have these meetings coming up, I know I'm doing observations, I'm updating present levels, and I'm writing progress and goals. Now, in my mind, those are the biggest pieces, especially for an annual. Those are the biggest pieces. Now, obviously, for a triennial, which we're gonna dive deep into, that's where you have that full gambit of testing. But sometimes that assessment, well, not sometimes, all the time, that assessment also includes those observations and informal measures, parent interviews, teacher interviews. So that's why I put that here, just because these will both include those types of things. So if we're looking at just an annual, I don't want to say just, but if we're looking at an annual or a plan review, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, I have a meeting in 2 weeks. Now, this is something I'm really working hard on. It's hard when I'm at multiple sites. So if you're a traveling speech therapist between school sites, you might understand this, but I always send home parent questionnaires prior to an annual or triennial IEP meeting. For an annual, sometimes I get a little bit delayed in my to-do list. And so I may forget to send home a parent questionnaire until a week before the meeting. And if that's the case, then I still will send it home, but I will always call parent and go through my questions too. So that way I am not, forcing them to return it right away or anything like that. I always say, if you can, but I'm going to call, and we will discuss these things just so they have that in front of them. But I do like to ideally send this parent questionnaire home about 2.5 weeks before the meeting to give them time, but also not to send it home too early for a student to be showing certain skills. Something that I did recently put actually on my website, so if you go to thanksmorris.com, are my parent questionnaires that I send home if you would like just to see an example of what I use. But I'm, again, preschool, so mine are very specific to early language, early receptive, early phonology, early expressive language, early social, and then all those developmental milestones are things that are part of my questionnaire. Another thing I'm going to do within maybe a 2-week period before my annual IEPs is I'm collaborating with my teachers. I'm maybe sending, I got really good at this during COVID. I would send a Google form where I would then have the teachers go through that Google form, and it would come directly back to it would be saved in my Google Drive of, just different things that their students were doing, and different concerns they might have had in class. Now, I still will sometimes do that, especially because I'm a traveling SLP. So I'll just have a general, Google form where it's like, how are they in this area? How are they in this area? But I do a lot since I'm in the classroom with my teachers on a weekly basis. Once a day for a full day I'm in the classroom. So we do a lot of touching base. And then typically I'll be able to have some time to sit and document what I've talked to the teachers about. So I just make sure within that 2-week period, I'm really talking about the progress on goals. I'm talking about what the teacher's thinking that this student maybe needs some little bit extra support with, and see if we're in line with our thinking. Excuse me, I'm going to take a sip of water. I also feel myself talking really fast, so if you need me to slow down, just say, slow down, Marie. And then for an annual or a plan review, I'm going to conduct an informal assessment. This is, including my observations of the students, and I always like to remind my fellow SLPs, observations don't happen in a 10-minute period when a child is maybe they're at their centers, they really like this center, we see them for 10 minutes, then we go away. I know our time is limited, but if that's the case, if you can only go in for 10 minutes one day, make sure you go another day and see them at recess, see them with their friends in a, larger learning environment where maybe it's circle time. I'm thinking preschool, I know, but, try and get those different types of situations so you can see really what is going on in the environment and what might be affecting their communication and maybe some behaviors and things like that. So that's a part of that informal process. I do also use sometimes, not for all students, it just kind of depends on if I have any questions. Some students, after working with them for a while and seeing where they are with their current goals and writing their progress, the next step and the next goal is this. And that's great. But for some students, I have I don't really know how they're doing with object functions, or I don't know how they're doing with yes/no questions. And so I might conduct an informal screener. I should have said screener, not assessment, because really that's what it is, just to see in those areas what's going on. You can find it depends on your grade level. I found my informal screener, it was shared with, the TPT link was shared with me years and years ago. I don't even remember who it's by, but I got it off of TPT, and it's specifically a preschool language screener. Honestly, with the new developmental norms and stuff that have come out in the last few years, I really need to look at updating that, because we need to be kind of keeping up with those things too, to make sure we're looking at, appropriate things for our kids. But just so you know, that's a great place to kind of find some of these SLP made materials. Just make sure that there are good references on them, okay? And it's not something that I just made on my Google Drive and shared with you. It's actually something that is based on, research. All right, there's my soapbox on that. And so after I've done all those 3 things, I began writing my IEP. the fun part. Sometimes, you know what, I will say, this is like my own because I'm a very like, I enjoy being cozy and I like to write, and it's just something I find fun to do. So sometimes when it's time to write an IEP, I like do all the like, what is that word? Hyge? Is that the word? Like HYGGE? Remember that? It was big a few years ago on social media. But I like to be very like, let me get my cup of tea or my coffee. Let me get a snack. Let me sit here and like vibe out with writing my IEP. It really does make it that much more enjoyable. So when I go in to write my IEP, again, this is what I do. Not everybody's going to do it the same, but this is to give you maybe a little insight on how I make it work for me. First, I do the progress report. And I think that's a pretty, it makes sense. It's pretty logical. You want to start with where your student currently is, right? So you go through, you write their progress report. Are they meeting their goals? Do they need a little bit of extra help in some goal areas? Great. Now I have a good idea of what I can do next. If I have done an informal screener, and when I'm looking at my observation documentation, then I compare that to those progress reports, and then I can go in and say, here's what their present levels are. Here's the full picture of what I'm seeing. I'll include tidbits from the actual observation. You know, when I saw Johnny on the playground, he did X, Y, and Z. When I saw him in class, he maybe had a little bit more trouble with this, or I wouldn't say trouble, but he maybe needed a little bit more support in this area. But when he had the peer models, you know, he did whatever. Like, you give the picture, you give the narrative. And then once I've put that on paper and I have a place where all the baselines for my student are, because that's what the present levels is, I'll go in and I'll write new goals. I'll look at those areas. So the way I write my present levels is basically a cheat sheet for me during an IEP meeting. What I do is first I look at all 5 areas that we are always looking at. I start with articulation and phonology and like oral motor functioning. So if I do an oral motor screener or I'm just commenting on how they are with oral motor, it's all in that area. So I talk about that in my present levels. Then I talk about, back up. I look at my parent questionnaire too. So I talk about how they're doing with artic and phono. I have a little blurb right after that says parent reports. Then I talk about receptive language and what I see. Then I put parent reports. Then I talk about expressive language. What am I seeing there? What are they showing me they can do there? Then I put parent reports. Did you guess it? Then I talk about their social pragmatics. And really something I've started doing for a lot of my kids, I've kind of just intertwined the social into the expressive, because a lot of that I'm finding, especially when we're thinking of neurodiversity affirming IEPs and goal writing, sometimes those social things, like I've taken out eye contact. I have taken out, what's the other one? There's some other ones. Like I've taken out certain things with play, because sometimes those developmental play milestones might look a little bit differently for different kids. And I've just, there's some things I've tweaked, I guess you could say. And I look at the kids individually is what I'm really trying to say here. And so for some kids, I don't feel the need to like talk about, greetings or talk about for no kid do I feel comfortable talking about eye contact. Maybe it's like personal space stuff, like maybe they don't feel comfortable like getting right there in the mix with the kids. So I'm not gonna like talk about that like it's an area that we are really concerned about at this point. Again, I work with the littles, so we have a lot that we're trying to do in terms of just the engagement piece and helping them enjoy communication and interaction. And so that's why sometimes I'll blend the social pragmatic and expressive language. That's a personal preference, and it just kind of depends on the situation for me, but that's where I'm at with that in my mind. Still learning, still doing a lot to kind of change the methods in which I used to do things. And then last, I will have any input or observations of fluency. So if I have a student that has fluency goals, that's where I'm going to be writing the bulk of their not the bulk of their present levels, but I will be including anything that's, going on with their goals or their fluency. And then I also have a blurb for voice. So I hit all those areas, and I have it like I put a title above each paragraph in my present levels. It makes it look really long. Now I summarize. When I'm in the meeting, I summarize. I don't, read line by line. Mainly what I'll do is I'll talk about strengths, and then I'll know, and if I bring like maybe the draft that I've written up, I'll just highlight the points I want to make sure I talk on, but I don't read line by line. That is just not my style in an IEP. I like to make it much more like, just like a conversation versus like, you know what I mean? It's, to me, it's a formal meeting, and it's very important, but I don't like to make it feel so business, because we're talking about a child and we're talking about how we can support them. And so, that's, again, we're going to get there, but I do not read line by line, even though my present levels do feel long. And I know the rest of the team is like, Marie writes pages and pages. I don't write pages and pages, but it's lengthier than the other areas. So then after I've done the present levels, I write new goals based on the baselines in my present levels. So again, if 3 out of those 5 areas are areas maybe where there's a little bit more concern, we need a little bit more support, I know those are where my baselines are going to fall. And then after goals, we know goals drive services. So I will write my services as they best meet the needs of my individual students. And then I will create a template for the notes page if this is a meeting where I case manage. Now, I know that if you're the case manager, if this is a speech-only student, there's a lot more pages than I just went over right here. I know that. Now, for me, these are the main pages that I am concerned about in terms of the time it's going to take me to kind of go through them and make sure I get all the details in and everything like that. Some of the other pages are more of those like checkbox pages where you're like, do they have behaviors? Yes or no? English language learner, yes or no? So that's kind of why I didn't feel the need to like talk you through that process of mine, because those are things that I just don't focus as much on, unless, like if it's English language learner, yes, then okay, I know that maybe there are areas in the statewide assessments on my IEPs. I have a page that talks about all their statewide assessments. So there might be areas in there where I'm talking about how they're getting the English language immersion kind of support in their statewide assessments, in their reporting documentation and things like that. Those are all areas, I will say, where if I don't know what to do on an IEP, I have people to ask. There's other SLPs in our districts that we can ask. You have other teachers you can ask. You have admin you can ask. So just make sure if there's something where, you're unsure on your specific documents and documentation, make sure you can ask. You don't have to know everything. That's not the point. We're here to collaborate. We're here to learn from each other. But if I am the case manager, another page that does get a little bit more of my attention is that notes page. Now, obviously, the meeting hasn't happened yet, right? So I don't know what's going to happen in the notes. I like to have a template ready because it just depends. In my district, I'm very blessed. The admin usually will take our notes. So I have a template ready for them where they can plug in. So basically, it's all the pages of the IEP. First, we're going to go over this, then we're going to go over this. And it's written, kind of in that narrative form. And then our admin will kind of fill in the points that we're talking about when parents have questions or when things come up that are a little bit different than maybe they're just a little bit more nuanced, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I will have that ready to go too if I'm the case manager. I'm trying to think, did I forget anything? As far as present levels go too, if you are the case manager, obviously there's more to fill out than just the communication area. I only touched on the communication area because that is the bulk of what we're going to focus on. But if you have a student that is a speech-only student, chances are you are going to have, a lot of average to above average, maybe slightly below average academics, or those gross motor, fine motor aren't going to be a concern because they don't have OT or PT, things like that. But what I do for that is go back to where I said I collaborate with teachers. I will send either a parent or a teacher questionnaire where it has all the present levels out on them. So this is something my district actually created for us to use. So I'll just send their generic one where it's like, academics, how are they in this? How are they in this? gross motor, and the teacher fills that out, and then that's where I plop it in to my present levels. So that might be a hack for you if that's something that in the past you felt like, oh my gosh, I have to do a gross and fine motor observation, which you always are. Think about it, you always are. But just to kind of put a little bit more of that emphasis of collaboration in there in these IEP meetings, the gen ed teacher is a valuable member of the team. They're supposed to be there for a reason. And so getting their input on all of these areas is really helpful. Another thing too, when you get their input on the academics, that's a great time, and this is what I do, when we're going through the present levels, I'll talk about parent concerns. We'll have that conversation. I'll talk about, their hearing and vision and all of that. I'll talk about communication. But when it comes up, when the academic piece comes up, that's when I'll turn it over to the teacher and I'll say, oh, and Mrs. Smith helped me complete this portion of your student's IEP because she's going to talk about how they're doing in the classroom. And then you turn it over to them and make that more of a again, we're all at the table together, so it makes it more of a conversation and discussion about how the student is doing from every team member. It gives everybody a role versus you just reading what their input was. It's less meaningful that way. So that's something that I like to do too. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay, next I'm going to take a sip of water. And then we're going to talk about triennial evaluation reviews. Okay, so obviously the difference here is that you're completing assessments. Assessments are made up of parent questionnaires, teacher questionnaires, observations, and then the formal assessment. So what I should have said is complete formal testing is made up of these things, right? Standardized. Formal assessments means standardized. I'm so sorry. I'm just realizing now I should have put standardized. Because that doesn't make sense, right? And so, welcome. I think I saw a few new people joining. So just hello, welcome. We're talking about IEPs. Stay on if you have questions about IEP writing or the IEP process, whether it's attending a meeting, being a participant in a meeting. Feel free to pop any questions or anything you have in the chat. And then the first part is recorded, so you can go back and catch up. We're on our triennial evaluation reviews. So yes, full formal assessment includes that standardized piece, parent questionnaires, teacher questionnaires, and then your observations. Again, we have it all. We like it all. Then once you do that assessment, you've completed it, you've written your report. We would have to do a whole other live, by the way, to go into the report writing. Maybe that's something we can do eventually. If you like that idea, give me a thumbs up or, a comment or something. Let me know what you think about that idea. Maybe we could do report writing. The only reason why I didn't go deep into it today is because we all do it differently. We all have a different clinical background based on maybe where we went to grad school, what clinicals we did, or where we're at now, or maybe what our district, hi Olivia, or maybe what our district has us do. Like for instance, my district has a report template for us, which makes it really easy because then I know, then I don't miss what I need to make sure I'm including in that report, right? So that does help a lot. Also, it has all the verbiage that's specific, especially with California. There's all the California Ed Code verbiage already in there for me. I don't have to go looking for it. So that's part of why having a report writing conversation in this specific live wasn't something that I was ready to do. But if it's something that you're interested in, again, let me know whether you put it in the chat now or comment it. Maybe we can make that happen. Or maybe I can bring somebody on to help me with that conversation. That would be actually really helpful to have multiple SLPs kind of round tabling, huh? Because then we can all learn from each other. Oh, ideas. So then after I've completed my assessments and written the report, now I'm going to just say, I don't always do this in exact order. Sometimes I'm writing my report, but I'm also focusing, I'm looking at my report and I'm like, oh wait, I need to update this in the IEP because based on this, you're just kind of okay, now I remember I want to talk about this or whatever. So I might be writing my report and then I might need to take a break from that. And I'm like, let me focus on their progress report, because sometimes that progress report is really helpful then to put back into the report to talk about what they're currently doing in your observations and things. So just keep that in mind. That's my process while I put it out step by step. Again, my brain it can be quite a place. And I have to just go with it some days. I have to just say, okay, you take the reins. And so sometimes different things happen than this organized of a list. But once I've done that, I complete the present levels. Now, here's what's fun about finishing the report and then doing your present levels. This can be, for me, a summary of the assessment report, right? I still will go in, just like I talked about with the annuals, I still will go in and I'll do it in those chunks. I'll do artic and phono, I'll do receptive language, I'll do expressive language, I'll include parent reports in all of those areas too, based on the questionnaires that they've turned in. But I will just take summaries from my report. So in receptive language, I'll just pull, or summarize quickly, this is what was seen in the evaluation. And then I'll always refer back. So I'll always say, please see report for further details. But I will put the snapshot in those present levels. I'm not just going to write in the communication portion. We'll just see the report, right? That's not very thorough. And you have to think about IEPs in terms of if my student leaves my district or leaves my caseload, this needs to be something comprehensive for a new SLP or a teacher or somebody to be able to look at and get the best representation I can give of my student, because maybe they don't get your report. Maybe somehow that didn't make it, but usually the IEP goes through, for me it's SACE. So it goes through SACE and my district sends it to another district. That IEP, because that's like the big legal document. I mean, I know the report is too, but it's just, there's something different. I'll get I'll get IEPs and I'll never get a report sometimes. And I have to go and do like a deep dive for a report, from 3 years ago or whatever. And so just, you're not going to want to put like the bare minimum in those present levels, even on a try or evaluation review. Remember who you're doing this for. I know it takes time out of our day and our schedule, but you're not having to write, every little thing. You're giving a summary and you can refer to the report, but you still want to at least give a snapshot. The best, like I said, the best representation you can. And then after that, it's just like the annual, right? Then I write my goals, I write my services. If I need to, I create that template for a notes page. But again, it just depends on whether you're not the case manager for the meeting. So that's the try and the evaluation review. And again, if there are any questions that come up, please pop them in the chat. We're going to move on. Let's see. We don't have much more to go. I do have a couple of just tidbits on writing present levels. This comes straight out of my course. And of course I go way deeper in the Thriving School SLP course, but I like to focus on these three things when I'm writing my present levels. First and foremost, always focus on student strengths. Strengths are, celebrate even the smallest successes, because when we do, we're really kind of going forward with that growth mindset, which is the next piece. Growth mindset language. I don't say a student cannot. A student does not. I like to try and use the phrase, he is not yet, right? Because it doesn't mean that he won't. It just means, this is an area where we, as the specialists or as the teachers, or even, it lets the parents know, this is an area where we can support a little bit more. They're not yet doing this, or they have emerging skills in this area, right? So just keep in mind the language that you're using when we're describing what our students' abilities are. And then I like this tip because you want to write about what you see and remember that you're writing about a human. Something that I learned early on was that it's not wrong to share a funny story about a student, or make the parents laugh a little bit, like remind them that their child has a sense of humor and this is why. There's nothing wrong with just kind of talking about the actual happenings that go on with their child in your speech room. They like to know what's going on, and that's what the child is currently doing. So why not share, happy memories. And then for goal writing, just some things to keep in mind. They are based on the present levels, which we talked about, of functioning. They should be focused on the current stage of communication and move students to just the next stage. Basically what that means is we want to write goals that are attainable for our students, because helping them find that success builds their confidence. And it also, it's really giving them their best chance. And then be sure to incorporate key elements of goal writing, which we all learned in grad school. This is something I do. We actually, in the course, I go through goals and we write them together. And so you want to be sure to incorporate those things like, the date they're met by, the settings, the amounts of support, all those things. And then for services, when you're writing those, you want to make sure, again, you're looking at the present levels of functioning and the goals. So it's like how do they do it? They do like the metaphors in grad school, like the cake, right? Like the present levels is like the actual cake, and then the frosting is the goals, and then the candle on top is the services. Like you have to have all those elements before you can write your services. They're individualized, okay? Now, like, let me give you a really good example. My program changed this year. And I, based on the amount of school sites I'm at and my capacity as a human, I am doing a lot of push-in therapy, which is proven, it's evidence-based that push-in therapy works for most kids. But it's not the end-all be-all, because I have to look at where my kids are at, what their goals are in. And if I have a child that is, maybe it's a severe artic or phonology delay, and I'm trying to push into their classroom and work on auditory discrimination, that makes no sense. That service is not written in an individualized manner, right? But my program has me at that school site on that day, and I need to be pushing into the classroom, and I'm not, necessarily going to be there on Friday. I'm not scheduled to be at that school site on Friday, but my student will need twice a week services. Do you see where I'm going? So I have to write I have to write services for my kids that are individualized, that are what they need. If I have a severe artic and phonology student, a 3-year-old, and I know that best practice and evidence-based practice is pull out individually for at least twice a week, 20-minute sessions, then I'm going to need to write those services and figure out how I'm going to advocate for my student, whether that means asking for SLPA support, whether that means figuring out a new, routine for myself and my schedule. And I know that puts a lot on us, but that's why I am very much talking a lot, even in the course, but also just in general. You might, if you know me, I talk a lot about how we can advocate for ourselves, set boundaries, and not get burnt out. But we need to be doing what's best for our students at the same time. So there is sometimes that overlap of like, wait, I can't, my program doesn't work this way, but the student needs this. Then we need to talk to who we need to talk to in order to let them know, hey, we're going to need a little bit more help in this situation because I'm not able to be there, but the student needs it. So what can we do? Who can we bring in? And, that's a district, that might be something that the district needs to work on. I know in my district, when we explain it, when we educate, we are most of the time heard. There's a little bit of a little lag sometimes with rolling things out because, staffing and things. So I get it. But I do always advocate that we are individualizing our services. And then you also are looking at your ed code, you're looking at your school district to write services. And I'm trying to think of a good example of this. But again, if you do have, for me, a program where in my preschool program, it's mostly push-in, and I have a language student, that's working on some receptive and expressive language, and those are things that, language is worked on in the classroom all day long, then I am, okay, my program says I can do this. This will work for them, and I'll adhere to that district criteria on that. So, things to keep in mind. And then when we're attending and running an IEP, some of my tidbits are to have an agenda to keep you and the team on track. Go through that agenda, but always stop to celebrate successful moments and fun stories. And then trust your team and be sure to give parents time to share and express concerns, ask questions throughout the meeting. I always try and stop and say, do you have any questions about this? Do you need me to go over this again? What would you like to add to this? and things like that. Because sometimes I think parents come in, and depending on how many team members there are in the meeting, it's overwhelming. I mean, they're there to fight for their kid, or just, maybe they're not feeling like they have to put up a fight, but they're there to support their little one, and they want the best for their little one. And they walk into a room where there's, 4 or 5 professionals all sitting around a table. That's intimidating. And so I always like to make sure they know like how important, hello, Crystal, how important they are to the team, and that they are just as much a member of the team as all of us at that table. We're all doing this together. And so their concerns, their questions, their input is so highly valued. And we want to make sure that that's, that they feel that. I do have, this might be something worth screenshotting. I'm going to make my picture just a little smaller. But if you can screenshot, take a picture with your phone. This is just an example of an agenda that I use, but again, I'm like very much kind of go with the flow when it comes to IEP meetings. But this is kind of what I was when I was trying to think about the agendas that I'll follow or I'll see other team members bring in. This is kind of the flow. So very first and foremost, we're welcoming and thanking team members for being here today. We're sharing progress. Maybe this is where personally, this is where I like to review the progress report, because this is what's current. This is how your student did this year. And we're celebrating those student success stories. And then asking parents somewhere in those first few things. Obviously there's all the protocols, right? You go around, you introduce. That's kind of what I mean by welcome and thank team members for being there. You do your introductions, you all sign in for attendance, you talk about the legal documents stuff, because I know for me it's like we talk about parent rights, we talk about different billing stuff, Medi-Cal, all that. So that's where I'll do that. And then somewhere within that first chunk of the meeting, that's when I'm saying, how are you? How do you feel your child is doing? What concerns do you have? Obviously, they've sent already back my parent questionnaire, so I have an idea of what they want to talk about, but it never hurts to just touch on that again right at the get-go, and let the rest of the team maybe know how this parent is feeling and what their questions are. And then review and write the IEP documents. And I say review and write because I know some of us maybe have everything kind of drafted, and then some of us write it, online, in real time. You're writing it together and you're drafting it all together. So whatever that looks like for you, that's, you kind of go through and emphasize what you're doing is still a draft until it's signed for. Make sure you're always stopping for parent and team member questions and input, teachers, admin, other service providers, and then go through the pages in order. Something that my supervisor for my school placement taught me to do was make your notes page. So remember how I talked about having the notes page as a template? So have that, print it out, and then you have your outline of what you need to make sure you go over, and you can sit there and check it off. You can just kind of keep it at the back of your file and just kind of make sure, oh yes, I did that. Okay. That is something I used to do when I first started out, and it really helped. Also, when it's time for the parents to sign, I always just like to thank them and emphasize how important they are as a part of our IEP team. Sometimes you do have the parents that are saying, well, I'm not sure I agree to everything or whatever. And I know in my district, now again, this is different everywhere, but in my district, we do allow them to take it home, review the draft. If they don't want to sign right away, then we either will reconvene for another meeting or give them some time to sign that, and I think we give them a week. It's either 7 to 10. I think it's a week. I don't think it's 10 full days, but it might be. I'm not sure. But something like that. So that way they have time to kind of go through it. And then they might call you with questions. I always let parents know, even after they sign, I'll let them know, hey, if you have any questions about anything after, if you read my report, if you read the IEP and you're like, wait a minute, I didn't understand this, call me, email me. Letting them know that it's not, that this is a fluid document and you can still ask questions. We can hold an IEP to make an amendment. Letting them know that, I think, helps a lot, because they understand, we really are all a team, and things can be changed. We're not locked in for a full year. If something isn't working, we can always change it. So that's just really important for me to share. And then just to kind of reiterate the focus of the meeting, I like having this in here again. This is from my course, because It's just really important to me that when we are thinking of IEPs, we're understanding what they are. Yes, it's a time to meet, and yes, it's a scheduled meeting in our day, but like, why are we there? We're there for a student. So we want to be mindful of that fact. And then also, of parent or caregiver perspectives and feelings. I was in a meeting the other day where a parent was upset, and I mean, it hurts my heart so much. And just, when she first started talking about her concerns, she just came off very blunt. And, it was just, you have to remember, like, this is a parent fighting for their child. And so while you don't want to hear that all the time, you don't want to feel like you're doing you're not a bad service provider, and you don't want to feel like you're doing the wrong thing, you're a bad service provider. Sometimes it's just important to remember, like, this is a parent fighting for their child, and so what they're saying right now, like, is coming from that place, and it's very valid. And it doesn't mean I have to take it personally, but it does mean that I want to be mindful of that and thoughtful, and then figure out how we can be, proactive in helping them feel valued and understood and heard. And maybe we need to make some changes. So just try to keep that in mind. I alluded to this. Try not to use jargon or abbreviations. I've done it. I still do it. But parents are so good at like being like, excuse me, what? Or even other team members. I had a teacher once be like, I don't understand what that means. And I was like, I'm so sorry. Like, we forget as SLPs, like, we're talking this talk all day long. I'll even do it like when I'm writing out like notes. For a parent. Like the other day I was sending home a communication board for a student, and I just wrote a little note on a Post-it on there, and I started to put the little C with the line over it for WIF. That's our abbreviation. That's what we know. And then I started to do it. I'm like, oh no, they don't, like, who knows? Maybe they do know that, but like, I can't assume that. And so we forget, we get into our moments. So if you catch yourself doing it in an IEP, just, I'm sorry, let me explain a little bit more, whatever. And then I wrote in here, beware of high versus low language. When you're talking about assessment results or how a child is functioning in their present levels, we don't want to say, oh, well, they're low in this and they're high in this. We want to come back to that, again, that growth mindset language. Well, they're not yet doing this, or they're doing this, but they just need an adult model right now. They're imitating it, or what that might, that's what that might look like. And then I think this is my final slide, or it's like my second to last. But just remember, IEPs are built by a team for a student. And sometimes when you're in those higher grades, like sometimes I've seen it in middle school, I know in high school, students are now brought into their IEP meetings, which I think is the coolest thing, that they have the ability to advocate for themselves and their learning in these meetings. So, in that sense, like, they're built by a team and a student for that student, right? There's more than what's on paper. Services are individualized, and then every state and district is going to do things differently. So you always want to ask if you're unsure. If you have any questions about what I am sharing, for instance, and I want you to feel free, put them in the chat, go for it, because this is going to be our time to do so. But I may not have the exact answer, because I'm in California, and I answer to a district that answers to a certain SELPA that then answers to, what do they answer to after SELPA? I don't think it's the state. I think there's a little more to, the county. And then the county answers to the state. So there's just a lot of variation that can happen even at those levels. But ultimately, we are all a part of a team that is developing a plan for a student. And it's really important that we are going through these processes very mindfully. So just keep that in mind too. And then we talked a little bit about this. I'm just gonna skip over this. Just IEP meetings can be a time for connection, a time for learning, a time to support, a time to collaborate, and a time to encourage and offer information. And I think we touched on all those things. Okay, this is the fun part. So this video is obviously live on Friday the 10th, and next week is ASHA. Can you believe it's already ASHA? And I'm going to my very first ASHA ever. And so I wanted to just do a fun little celebration of ASHA week. And so I've been talking a lot about my Thriving at School SLP course, where I dive into writing IEPs. You'll get access to all my handouts, including speech and language questionnaires. You'll get guidance on life-work balance, guidance on data collection, guidance on planning therapy sessions, all those things, and you get 3.75 PD hours, so continuing education hours, as long as you take the quiz at the end, print out the certificate. But right now, for ASHA Week, I am doing a promotion on it. By the way, before I continue on, if you do have any questions, pop them in the chat. I will go back slides. We will answer those. I want you to know this is your time to do so. If you're watching the replay of this, again, comment your questions and I will answer those for you as well. But I am doing $20 off the Thriving School SLP course with the code ASHA, which I think I will link in the chat and then link in the description of this video too. Let me see if I can, let's see how fancy I can be right now because I have so many tabs open. Let's make sure I do this the right way. But yeah, if you use the code ASHA at checkout when you register, you can get $20 off that course. And what that is basically, again, you get 6 modules plus 2 bonus modules that are going to equip you for establishing meaningful connections in the schools, collaborating in the schools, supporting behavioral needs of students, planning and not planning therapy, collecting data effectively and efficiently, and then writing and running successful IEP meetings where we will dive deeper into basically everything we talked about today, plus 2 bonus modules, one on neurodiversity affirming practices in the schools, and then one on bringing mindfulness into your speech sessions. So that's a really fun topic for me to talk about because that's like my bread and butter. But you do get handouts to support your daily tasks, school SLP. I have those parent handouts and parent questionnaires, and then you do get that 3.75 hours towards continuing education. So that is it. That is my spiel on IEPs. I just want to thank you for joining my live. And I don't see questions now, but again, if you think of anything, you can let me know in the comments. You can find me on Instagram. Oh yeah, that reminds me, that's my last slide. There we go. So you can find me on Instagram at Thanks Morris, which I'm kind of assuming those of you that joined found me through there since that's where I announced the live. But if you have any direct questions that you'd like to just send my way, Marie at Thanks Morris is a good email, thanksmorris.com, sorry, is a good email to do so at. You can find more, whether it's coaching, resources. I have so many free downloadables at thanksmorris.com that can support you both with mindfulness, being a speech pathologist. There's kids handouts on there. So you can find a lot of stuff over there too. But I do really appreciate you taking the time to join me tonight. It's been really fun, even on a Friday night, to talk about IEPs because I do just love sharing the benefit of being more mindful about how we go through our process of writing an IEP, through our process of being a part of an IEP team and all of that. And so I'm just truly grateful that we could do this together. So if there are no questions, again, remember the code ASHA, A-S-H-A, all capitals, will get you $20 off now through, I think I put the date for you, but I forgot it. I think the 20th. Yeah, now through the 20th because it's ASHA week, baby. And if you're going, I'll see you there. And that's that. I hope you have a great night. And we will hopefully catch up in a vlog or a live or something very, very soon. But other than that, I'll see you later.